Hi everyone, my name is Anna Yosin, and today's video is all about the breath and the voice. What you'll learn in today's video is how your breath supports your voice, how your voice calls in your reality, and what you can do to change your story, your narrative, to change your reality. So first of all, let's talk about the mechanics of breathing as it relates to the breath. So we've talked in previous videos and in different meditations and different breathing exercises how to expand the breath. So you want to breathe in deeply, not just shallowly through the top of the lungs, but breathe in all the way to the bottom of the lungs. In order to do that, you need to stretch your torso, you need to stretch your shoulders, your chest, and your neck. So if your torso is really, really tight, if you're holding a lot of tension in your stomach, if you're really stressed out, and that's kind of like where you're holding your tension, and you're like this little ball of just tension, we need to relax that. We need to expand the rib cage. So a few stretches you can do are obviously like lateral stretches on both sides, just opening up the rib cage there. We can expand the chest, opening up. You can put your hand on a wall and open up the chest muscles. We can bring our hands up here for triceps. But that also helps open up the rib cage, and then a fold forward to help extend the back muscles as well. So you really want to be flexible through the torso in order to expand the rib cage to allow space for the lungs to expand. So when we're talking about the lungs, they're not actually a muscle. They themselves don't necessarily contract or expand in the way that a muscle does. The muscles surrounding the lungs, like in the rib cage, those intercostal muscles, those are the things that expand, and your lungs are basically like just little, almost like a jellyfish, like sacs that can fill up with air. So as we allow those muscles to expand, then that gives space for our lungs to expand. And then as we're consciously breathing in, then we can breathe in and expand the lungs from there. So you're breathing in, breathing all the way into the bottom of your lungs, expand your rib cage, expand your belly, and then we have this little muscle, or this, actually it's a pretty big muscle underneath your rib cage called the diaphragm. And so that muscle is a horizontal muscle, and when you contract it, it pushes up on your lungs, and so then you can push all the air out. So as we breathe in, we expand after we've done a little bit of stretching, and then as we contract that muscle, it helps us push all the air out, and then we can contract the rib cage muscles, the chest muscles, the back muscles, etc. And so what that's going to do is it's going to give support and air through your vocal box. So that's not the right terminology, but you get the idea. And so then that sound and vibration through your vocal cords can be heard. And so if we don't have enough air and enough breath behind that voice and underneath it to support the vibration that creates the sound, then we can't speak, we can't sing, we don't have a way of communicating vocally. And I could say this, here's a story, example. I got COVID, and when that happened, I wasn't able to get any air in my lungs and to support my lungs. And it almost felt like I would have to consciously just really slowly breathe so I can expand. But if I didn't do that, it was like I didn't have any air behind my breath, and I wasn't able to speak. I would kind of stutter a little bit because I didn't have the air to support the vibration of the sound coming through my vocal cords, which was very, very strange. And I was like, it was very frustrating as well, because I would have to like consciously just slow my breath down to expand my rib cage so then I could get the air to support my breath. It was very frustrating because it was hard to talk to people during that time. And so the breath that supports your voice is super, super important. And just remember that if you're one of those people who are like, oh, I can't sing, my voice sounds like crap, la, 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 it's probably because you don't have the full breath behind and underneath to support the sound of your voice. So I encourage you to play around with that. Your posture plays a big role in that as well. So if we're slouched over and everything's contracted, of course, you're not going to be able to open your lungs up and get the proper air. So just make sure that you are sitting up tall, standing up tall, shoulders rolled down and back, yet relaxed, lifting up with the crown of the head, slightly tucking the chin under so that there's actually space in the throat too. So if we're kind of leaning forward so much, or if we're super down like this, it doesn't allow space within the actual throat and the larynx to have to vibrate the vocal cords. So that's a little bit of the body mechanics behind it. There's much more to it if you go into depth of like vocal lessons or singing lessons or anything like that. I want to talk a little bit about how your breath, how your voice communicates to the universe, to the world, to other people, what you want or what you don't want. And that's what creates your reality, right? So let's, instead of like the actual words at first, we'll get there, but let's talk about the timbre of your voice, the volume of your voice, the confidence behind your voice, the rhythm behind your words and your articulation. All of that tells people how to treat you. So this is really, really big. If you walk into a room, your posture's down, you're kind of slouched down, you don't really speak very loud. Oh, hi, how are you? Yeah, hi, oh, my name is Anna. They're gonna treat me a lot different than if I walk into the room and I say, hi, I'm Anna. Nice to meet you. Where I drop into my lower register instead of kind of being up here in a little sing-songy place where that in and of itself is very apologetic, and it's telling people that I'm a people pleaser and I'm here to please you. So, I'm here for you. You're not here for me, right? That's sort of what that tells people. And it comes from a sense of not feeling safe in the world. So the way that you speak, the timbre of your voice, whether it's like very sharp or whether it's very sing-songy or whether it's very kind of apologetic, all of that plays a factor in how other people receive you, how they perceive you, and then in turn, how they will treat you. So your voice tells people how you want to be treated or how to treat you. Even if that's not necessarily what you want, it's telling them how to treat you and how to talk to you, right? So, and I used to do this as a personal trainer because growing up, I was very, very shy, very, very quiet. As a kid, I didn't want to talk. I was afraid to sing by myself. I was afraid to be heard or seen. I grew up in a very tumultuous environment and I never really felt safe, to be honest. And so that manifested in me being very quiet and very timid and very shy. And people would always have to ask me to speak up. And that would jolt me even more and make me even more embarrassed and make me not want to say anything even more, right? And so I had to learn how to breathe deeply, how to engage my voice, and how to project through choir and through theater. So especially in theater, because you have to project to hear, so the audience can hear you, right? It was really, really hard for me. And I took voice lessons for a couple years and just did a lot of vocal work. Now, as an adult, being a personal trainer, my natural tendency as a young person, because of how I grew up and how whatever, is I would always be like really, really nice and, okay, hi, how are you today? We're going to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to do some push-ups, burpees, blah, 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 blah. And when I would show up as that trainer, people would give me pushback. People would say, no, I don't really want to do that. No, I don't like push-ups. Let's do something else. Like, even had one person tell me, can you just yell at me for a minute? Like, that's going to get me going. And so I played around with the timbre of my voice, dropping into my lower register like this, as opposed to this, like, hi, okay, we're going to do some push-ups now, as opposed to, all right, now we're doing 10 push-ups, go. And when I spoke with confidence, when I dropped into my lower register, when I increased my volume, people respected that and they responded to me differently. They did what I asked them to do and they didn't give me pushback most of the time. So how you speak actually tells people how to treat you, how to respond to you, and how to interact with you. Now, let's talk about how that goes into manifesting what you want and creating the reality that you want. So let's say you're in a job you really don't like, but you show up to the world, you show up to the job and you're very timid, you're very nice, you're very like, okay, I'm here, I want people to like me, and then maybe if they like me, they'll give me a promotion one day, and like that'll be really great and wonderful, and I'm a people pleaser and I'm friendly. That is telling people that you're not ready for more responsibility, and so they're not going to necessarily give that to you, right? And so you have to, not in a mean way, not in an arrogant way, but show up confident. And confidence, it comes with practice, it comes with doing things more, but it also oftentimes is an actual decision. So if you decide, you know what, this is what I want, I'm going to go for it, even though I feel a little bit afraid or I feel anxious about it or I don't want to rock the boat or whatever, I'm deciding to do this and show up and be strong about it. So oftentimes it's actually a decision that you can make. And that changes the way that you speak to people, it changes your posture, it changes the energy that you bring when you come into a room. And all of that affects what you get in life and how people respond to you. So that's really, really important. And some really interesting things to play with. I will do in some later videos some exercises on how you can play around with that, just walking around the room as different versions of yourself. And it's really fun, actually, when you can kind of embody this version of yourself that you dream of being, that's more confident, that's more sexy, that's more just like taking the bull by the horns and going after life going after the things in life that you actually want instead of being afraid of that. So that being said, all of that is a secondary part to, that's the external part, to the internal part, right? So it all starts internally with the stories that you're telling yourself, the stories that you're telling the world about yourself. So example, I can go around in the world and I did for a while, for a long time in my early 20s, of telling the story of how, you know, my family is dysfunctional and how I had the short end of the stick. I grew up in a house of boys. I didn't really, there wasn't any space for me. And so I just like went out into the world speaking this, and I got more of what I was speaking, right? I didn't know any better and I was really trying to overcome those things. However, the story that I was telling kept running and running and running of different traumas that I had experienced in life, and the traumas that I was continuing to experience as a young adult. So that's really important to understand and be aware of the story that you are telling to yourself and to the world. And be aware of the words and the phrases that you're using. So for example, if the story you're telling is I'm broke, You're going to constantly be saying, oh, I can't afford that. Oh, I wish, oh, that must be nice to go on vacation. Oh, whatever those things are, pay attention to the words that you are saying, because that tells you what story you're telling yourself. And when we're talking about the story that you're telling yourself, those are your beliefs, right? And beliefs sometimes feels like a really strong word, like, oh, I don't actually believe that. I'm just venting. Well, what is a belief? A belief is a thought you keep thinking. So if you keep thinking the same thought, and if the thought that you're thinking is something that you don't want, like, oh man, I always get the short end of the stick. This sucks. Like, oh, this again? People always treat me like this. People never respect me. People think I'm stupid. Whatever it is, whatever that thought that you keep thinking over and over again, so much so that you're actually vocalizing it, that's a belief that you have. And you need to write those down. You need to be aware of them, because if you're not aware of them, you can't change them. If you don't change them, you're going to keep living the same reality over and over again. You're going to continue to be stuck in this cycle and be the version of yourself that you don't necessarily want to be. Now, you might be a great version of yourself and you just want to evolve to the next version. That's cool too. But you have to be aware of the thoughts that you're thinking, which are creating beliefs. The thoughts that you're thinking then go into vocalization, and you vocalizing whatever that is actually speaking that into existence, into reality. There's a lot to this. So what can we do about it? Well, we can change. First of all, we have to be aware of what we're thinking, what our beliefs are, the story and the narrative that we're telling ourselves and we're telling to the world, not only through the actual words that we're speaking, but with the sound of our voice, the confidence in our voice, the postures and the gestures and the energy that we bring into the space. All of those things are a vibration and a resonance, and the existence, consciousness, the universe will bring you what you're in resonance with. So to change that, you have to be aware of what that is, first of all, and then you can do some healing work on those things. So I will say this as a side note: if you keep thinking the same thing over and over again, and that's a traumatic event, that's called PTSD. And even if it's not like, oh, I wasn't in war, I wasn't, assaulted, I wasn't blah, 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 blah. If it's a traumatic thing that happened to you that you keep repeating over and over in your head, that is post-traumatic stress disorder. So you need to do some work on healing that, releasing that, forgiving that, and letting that go so that you can move on from there. And that's a whole nother side thing. There's a lot of things you can do for that. So once you get there, then you say, okay, I recognize this, I'm healing this, I'm letting it go, but now I have to replace it with the opposite of what it is. So if the story that you're telling is, I'm always broke, I'm always struggling, you need to, first of all, figure out what the roots of those beliefs are, and then go and say, okay, actually, I'm abundant. Life is full. I have everything I need. Let me look around at all of the things that I have already. I truly am blessed. I truly have a lot. I have a lot to be grateful for, and I'm prosperous. And you have to change that. And at first, you're not going to necessarily believe what you're saying, but if you say it enough times, well, you'll start to believe it, because what is a belief? It's a thought that you keep thinking. So we have to replace those thoughts with the things that we want in our life. And then once we think it enough, we'll actually vocalize it and speak it out loud. And I guarantee you the sound, the timbre, the tone, the volume, everything about your voice, the way you're speaking it, is going to be different than the converse, than the polar opposite. So that segues into one thing I want to touch on is the yin and the yang within this whole manifestation thing, these polar opposites, the masculine, feminine, the action, the passive, the physical, and the non-physical. Okay, so when we're talking about yin and yang, they're both important in order to create your reality, right? You can have action, 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 but if you don't have an idea, that action is pointless. It doesn't go anywhere. You don't do anything. You're just chopping down trees for nothing, right? So you need to have the idea, the non-physical, which are your thoughts. And then once you have your thoughts, then you have the bridge, which from the non-physical to the physical, which is the voice, right? The voice tells us what we can create. So if I have an idea of a really beautiful home I want to build, if I never speak it out loud, it's just going to be a thought forever. It's going to be in the ethers, this like, where is it? It's nowhere. It's just an idea, right? So I had this idea, I had this dream, I had this vision. I need to speak it out loud in order for action to happen to create a physical thing out of that. So from the yin, this non-physical, bridging the gap to the physical through the voice, to the yang, to create something in reality. So they're both equally important. And so I want you to pay attention to your own life. Just kind of take an inventory at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, even if it's the middle of the day, wherever you are right now. Think about how much action you're doing versus how much non-action you're doing. And if there's kind of an ebb and flow or a balance somewhere in there. If all you're doing is just like busy work, go, 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 you don't even have time to hear your own thoughts, then you're in yang dominance, that action, physical dominance. If you're stuck and you can't even get off the couch and you're just drowning in your own thoughts, then you're in yin dominance, you're in this non-physical dominance. Now you need to find a balance between both of those in order for your life to manifest in the way that you want. So, and I'll make another video on that specifically, but I just wanted to talk about the yin, the yang, which is, you know, other words for these realms, these polar opposites, yin, yang, feminine, masculine, non-physical, physical, lunar, solar, cold, hot, dark, light, those sort of things. They're the polar opposites. And we need a balance of the polar opposites in order to create the life that we want. So, that's really cool too. Let's go into, okay, the next thing I want to talk about with the breath and the voice, specifically the voice, is the expression of the soul, right? So the voice is how we express ourselves, how we communicate with others, specifically as human beings, and the stories that we tell, right? So as far as I know, and as far as most of us know, and I could be wrong about this, out of all the creatures in the world, humans are the ones that tell stories. They'll sit around a campfire, we'll tell stories. We go out to lunch, what do? We tell each other stories. Oh, this thing happened to me. Oh, that's great. Let me tell you this thing. We teach each other through stories, through allegories, through texts and whatnot. And so that's how we learn how to behave. That's how we learn how to be human. That's how we learn how to be with each other and interact with each other. It's very, very special, this storytelling and this voice, specifically to our humanity, which is really, really beautiful. Our stories are important, an integral part of our humanity. And when we don't speak our stories, when we don't tell our stories, when we don't speak our truth, it actually negatively affects our health. And so what does it mean to speak and be heard? And what does it mean to not speak, not be heard, not be seen, hiding, right? Okay, so when we look at the history of people, oftentimes when people spoke up, they would be hurt, they would be murdered, they would be tortured. And specifically, I want to talk about something called the witch wound. Now, this isn't necessarily like a, going down the witchy path or whatever, but it's a term that is used for that specific thing because there were so many women who were murdered, who were tortured, who were silenced for speaking up throughout the whole world in the name of, oh, they're a witch, right? And so let's talk about what that does to us physically. There's a term called epigenetics, and in what that means is the traumas that our ancestors experienced, or vice versa, the other way, actually changes the gene expression within our DNA, and then they'll pass that gene expression down to their children, their children's children, and so on and so forth. So if your grandparents or even great-grandparents experienced a trauma, it changed their gene expression, and that could be something that you're actually experiencing today. So voice is also one of them. And historically, because a lot of people have been silenced, and I would say more so women have been silenced, that in order to survive, they had to be quiet, right? If they were quiet, if they weren't seen, if they weren't heard, they might have a chance of survival. So what does that do? It changes part of your gene expression, and now that personality trait of being quiet, being shy, being meager, those sort of things are passed down on to generation. And if you find yourself having trouble speaking up, like when you try to speak up and your voice just locks up, you don't really know that maybe, like, I never experienced a trauma where I was like silenced. My family is really great. Everyone in school like encouraged me. I don't know where this comes from. It could be your epigenetics and what happened to your ancestors that you don't know about, which is like really big. And this isn't just a woo-woo kind of like, oh, that's whatever sort of thing. There's actual science to back this up. There's a book called It Didn't Start With You. And the author, I can't remember the name of the author, but he goes into like how, and he tells many stories of his clients that the traumas that their ancestors experienced are actually causing them a lot of problems in their life. So one example he gives in the story or in the book is there was a college student. He was a collegiate athlete. He got a scholarship for a sport, and all of a sudden at 19, he couldn't sleep. He felt cold all the time. And it was affecting his grades. It was affecting his performance. It got to the point where he had to drop out of the sport. He was failing his classes. He went to psychologists. He went to doctors. He went to all these different things. He couldn't figure out what was wrong with him, why he couldn't sleep. And so he went to this guy, and this guy, he says, okay, the words you speak are important. They're telling us something. The thoughts that are coming into your mind. So if there's a phrase that keeps coming into your mind or a specific fear or something, let's write those down. And this kid had, he was like, I feel like if I sleep, I'm going to die. Like this phrase keeps coming up, and he was cold all the time. So he's like, okay, I want you to dig into your family history. I want you to go and ask what happened with your parents, your grandparents, anything, great grandparents, any stories that happened. So it turns out his grandfather at the age of 19 froze to death. He died by freezing to death. And no one ever talked about it. And that was the first time he had learned about it. And so once he did that digging, this story of his grandfather, this trauma that had happened, the story was never told. It was never spoken out loud, lived on through the genes that then affected his grandson, who didn't even know what that was about. Like, that was a real thing that happened. And once he was able to discover that and work through that and actually speak that story out loud and release it, it changed. Like, he was then able to sleep. He was then able to recover. He was then able to get his life back. So story is very, very, very important to us as human beings for our health, for healing our ancestral trauma, healing our own personal traumas, but also healing the collective consciousness trauma. And we're in a huge transitionary point right now in humanity where there's a lot of stuff that's coming up that to be healed. And so I encourage you to speak those stories. If there's a story that you've been holding inside that you've never spoken out loud, you don't feel like it's safe, at the very, very least, write it down somewhere. And if you don't feel like it's safe to write down somewhere, as soon as you're done writing it down, crumble it up, throw it away, burn it, whatever. But those stories need to come out. We need to speak our stories. We need to speak our truths. And what happens when we don't? Our health is affected negatively. A lot of times what happens, think about, it's our throat chakra, right? A lot of times people will get thyroid issues. A lot of times people will get throat cancer or gum cancer. A lot of times people's teeth, their mouths, they're really, you know, the health of them is really, really bad. It comes from not being able to speak your truth. When we talk about, like, example, addiction, like meth, that's something that makes people lose their teeth. Well, let's look at like the consciousness of that to begin with. Why are people doing those drugs to begin with? It's because they're holding this pain that's inside, and maybe when they've tried to speak up about it, they've been silenced. And so it is related in some way. And it's really fascinating when you sort of like delve into these things and kind of like look at that. So why people will be drawn to certain substances for addiction affects the different things in your body. So we need to tell our stories. We need to speak our truths. And we need to be able to create a space that is safe for us somewhere, even if it's just by ourselves in, like, you know, when no one else is home, to be able to write those stories down and release them from our bodies. Because there's another book called The Body Tells a Story that explains all about how traumas, memories, different things that we've experienced in our lives and in previous lives, we actually hold in the fascia of our bodies. And so here's another fun story. I did a 10-day silent retreat, Vipassana retreat, and it's a type of meditation. So Vipassana is basically, you're kind of scanning your body and just looking for any sensations from the top all the way back to the bottom and up again and all around. And when you experience a sensation, whether it's good, bad, whatever, you try not to label it as good or bad, just notice what it is and see if anything comes up and then move on. And so I found that when I had certain tensions and I stayed with that pain, so to speak, or that tension, maybe someone's face would come into my mind, and then I realized, oh, I'm holding tension here because of this argument I had with so-and-so. Interesting. That's where my body's holding it. Now I can release it. And oftentimes, all we need to do to release it is just to speak that story out loud. Not to continue to like repeat it over and over and over again, but oftentimes PTSD, these thoughts that we continue to think over and over again, is because we don't actually speak them out. We don't share that story with anyone else. So I encourage you, maybe there's a support group, maybe there's an artist's way group, maybe there's a storytelling group that you could go to that's a safe space that will allow you to tell these stories of your life, even if it's just writing it down. So that's what I really encourage you to do. And what we can do physically with our breath, to help change that. Remember, I talked about this in previous videos, how you can change your breath to affect your nervous system, right? So when we're experiencing a traumatic thought, our nervous system gets activated and we're all riled up. You might even be having imaginary arguments in your living room or in your car because you're thinking these thoughts. What can you do? First of all, bring awareness to it. Separate your awareness from this thought that you're thinking, and you can consciously deepen and slow your breath, right? When you do that, it then signals to your body, hey, I'm not in this dangerous situation right now. I'm actually safe right now. And once you can get a big breath that supports your vocal cords, then you can speak loudly. And so when fear signals your nervous system to activate, you can counteract that fear with your slowing down your breath. And that allows your body to tell a different story. And maybe, I don't know about this, but maybe that can help change your gene expression to something that is more constructive and less destructive, or of something of more ease rather than dis-ease. So I know it's a lot. All that being said, let's come back to the first initial thought that I had on all these breath videos, which is, what is breath? Breath is prana. Prana is life force, universal life force. It's the life force that literally runs through everything in our universe. That is what our breath is. So with that, let's remember that allowing ourselves to breathe deeply, even through fear, even through anxiety, even if your throat is locked up, speaking your truth, telling your story, helps us connect to everything, to all that is. And it signals to the universe that actually it is safe to speak out loud. It is safe to speak my truth. It is safe to tell my story. And it connects you to all that is, this interconnectedness. And I'm going to leave you with a quote that is sort of a yoga thing. So there's this, one of the limbs of yoga is called samadhi. And this is a fun way of, or a very beautiful way of expressing what samadhi is. So first of all, go ahead and close your eyes. And then just take a nice big breath. Another big breath. And keeping your eyes closed, let these words sort of wash over you. Let the breath and the movement of the body unfold inside its own silence together. When that happens, the awareness of energy leads to the stillness and to the connection to life centered in the heart. Then life looks like a meditation as we become more and more aware of the interconnectedness of life. I'll say it again. Let breath and movement unfold inside its own silence together. When that happens, the awareness of energy leads to the stillness and connection to life centered in the heart. And then life looks like a meditation as we become more and more aware of the interconnectedness of life. The awareness of the interconnectedness of life is samadhi. And the gateway, the door, the opening to samadhi is your breath, and the awareness of your breath. So, with that, I encourage you to, at the very, 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 very least, take a few breaths, a few minutes each day to just simply listen to your breath, to be aware of your breath, to be aware of the life force that runs through your body and animates it. And with that, I want to say thank you for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts, your comments, and any other ideas or anything you have to contribute to this conversation. Please put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. I wish you much love, much light, blessings and blessings. And as always, namaste.